Hello, everyone. Welcome to Being Patient Brain Talks. I'm Deborah Kahn, founder of Being Patient. This talk is in partnership with Cognito Therapeutics, and we today are going to talk about non-invasive treatments for Alzheimer's disease. Well, joining me is Dr. Michelle Papka. She is an investigator on the HOPE study, which is a wearable headset that emits flashing lights to treat Alzheimer's disease. So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, let's just start at the beginning. I mean, there's a lot of headsets around and on the market. There's those, but this one specifically is under trial to treat Alzheimer's disease. Is that the first of its kind?
It is. And one of the things that I always like to point out when I meet with patients and families about biotechnology, and I also say this about supplements and other alternative treatments for Alzheimer's disease, is that we do have an empirical process, a way that we test things for the FDA to determine whether or not, this is something that works and something that is safe for the public to use. And so I always want to be supportive and have people, consumers, be knowledgeable and educated about the information and the data that's behind what they may be considering using. So while I'm not aware of all the different, headsets that are available, I have had patients come in and tell me that they're finding things on Amazon and things like that. But this particular piece of biotechnology is being, tested in an empirical process to see if it works, if it's effective, and if so, in what way is it effective?
Okay, so can we call this neuromodulation? I mean, I hear that term a lot. What is neuromodulation, and does it apply to this specific headset?
Well, neuromodulation in a very, general term or general way of understanding is that we're modulating neurons, the cells in the central nervous system. And so far, the data that we have on this device, based on previous studies, is that people who got active treatment seem to have less volume loss in their brain. So the brain atrophies just like other muscles do, and this happens as a result of normal aging. But in Alzheimer's disease, where you have a pathology in the brain, the brain volume loss happens at an accelerated rate. And, we might infer that as, patients have maintained brain volume, that is doing something to the neurons.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the technology. This in particular is flashing lights, gamma. Is that right? Is that so tell me a little bit about what we know about how it works. And then in particular, is this something to prevent Alzheimer's? Is it going for reducing the potential of plaque buildup? How exactly does it work?
So the apparatus is providing multi-sensory stimulation. So it's the flashing lights, and also the person is wearing headphones where they're also getting auditory stimulation. So it's visual stimulation and auditory stimulation. And the stimulation, it's calibrated per patient. So it's catered for them to ensure that the level of the stimulation is causing a certain brainwave activity. So we want to make sure that the patient is actually responding to it. And so it induces this gamma wave activity to have this sort of steady wave activity that we know is involved in learning and memory. So these brain waves, these gamma brain waves, are utilized in learning and memory.
So we have a question that had come in and asking, is it really an alternative to, I mean, I know it's obviously non-invasive, non-drugs, but is it alternative to other treatments like Leqembi, or is it something that is looked at to use in combination with other drug therapies?
That's such a great question. So right now, we are not so this is a clinical trial that is ongoing, and we are not including people who are currently on drugs like Leqembi. So we don't know the answer to that. And the reason that we're not including them is just because we're really testing in clinical trials. We want to test one, treatment at a time. And we don't know the effect, but certainly the idea would be over time that hopefully we will have people on what we call combination therapies. So they may be on a monoclonal antibody treatment like Leqembi or Kisunla or another treatment, and then also be able to be on this treatment, because these treatments are working by different mechanisms of action. And so we would like for people to be on a combination therapy with different mechanism of action, but we also have to test the safety of that.
Right. And we'll go into the study a little bit more, but I want to ask you about, actually, Jennifer had asked us, she said that her husband, who's taking menmetine, which obviously treats symptoms of Alzheimer's, it's not a disease modifying drug, um, he was not allowed into the study. And she wanted to know why, because, she would actually consider removing him if this was an alternative. So she's, why aren't people who are taking non-disease modifying, like I can understand the Leqembis and the at that time the monoclonal antibody therapies, but why not people who are taking symptomatic drugs for Alzheimer's?
So for every clinical trial, including this one, there are lists of medications that people can and cannot be on. So for this particular trial, somebody could be on Aricept or one of these cholinesterase inhibitors, but not on memantine. And Leqembi and Kisunla are newer drugs. So when this study was designed, those drugs I don't think had even been FDA approved yet, certainly not Kisunla. So for each trial, we just have different inclusion and exclusion criteria. The question of whether or not to go off memantine or Namenda in order to be in the trial is something that I recommend discussing with the treating physician. So we have had patients enroll in the trial at our site who had been on Namenda and were willing or wanted to go off it, and in discussion with the treating physician made the decision to do that. But I would recommend that as a discussion, and it's a potential option if everybody agrees that that's a good course of action.
Okay, and you spoke earlier about really the shrinkage of the brain, which, as you pointed out, could be normal aging, right? Where our brains all shrink as we get older. But what about measuring? Is the HOPE study actually taking in people? Do they have to have amyloid in their brain? And is there a reduction of amyloid? What are we seeing? I know you're on phase 3 right now, so it's hard to understand exactly what's going to come out of this trial until it's finished, obviously. But I'm wondering, what did you learn from phase 3? Where exactly are we in terms of what we know about efficacy?
So in the phase 2 trial, the Overture trial, some of the initial rationale of that trial was that perhaps this would help reduce amyloid in the brain. And while that trial did not provide evidence that it reduced amyloid, that being on active treatment reduced the amyloid burden in the brain, what it did show is that people who got active treatment had less brain volume loss than people who got the placebo. And along with that, people who got the active treatment also had a slower cognitive decline and slower decline in daily living skills. So we know that it is doing something in the brain that is helping to preserve brain mass and functioning.
Okay, so what was the specific criteria? I mean, did people have to have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's? What, like, who's going into this particular study?
So this current study, the HOPE trial, for which we are still enrolling patients who have moderate symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, it was initially enrolling patients with mild and moderate symptoms. The study is open now only to people with moderate symptoms, and there aren't many studies for people who have moderate symptoms, so it's exciting to be able to offer this as a potential opportunity. And I'm sorry, I lost track of your
No, no. So,
question.
so patients who are who would enter this trial, they
Mhm.
obviously then they have to have a confirmed
Oh yeah. So the way that they're doing it, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Um, so the way that we are, according to the protocol, the patient will get what's called a blood biomarker. So they would get a blood draw. So among other types of testing and criteria that would happen during a screening visit, we will do a blood draw, and we are looking at their blood p-tau measure. And so the blood p-tau measure can give us an indication of whether or not there are plaques and tangles that can be forming in the brain. And if the patient meets a certain cutoff on the blood p-tau measure, they would be eligible to move forward and continue in the screening and the study. So there are different criteria that the patient has to meet, but the biological criteria to help establish that this person has, underlying Alzheimer's disease pathology is the blood test.
Tell us a little bit about the mechanics of the study. How long and how often do you have to wear the headset? Like, do patients take it home, or they have to be at the office? And what is that like?
So that's one really great feature about the study and utilizing this type of treatment is that it is done at home, and they use the device for an hour a day, and they can do it at home. For patients who may travel, they can use it wherever they're going. So it's 1 hour a day, and they use it at home, and they come into the research site really just about once every 3 months. So when they come into the research site, we're doing all kinds of other procedure and testing, but the actual treatment sessions occur wherever is convenient for the patient.
Tell me about gamma rays and what they have to do. Like, how did we isolate gamma rays to think, oh, if we, increase a certain light, then we're going to get more gamma, or I don't even know how to explain that. So explain it to me. How does that all work?
Mhm. So the basis for this was really based on animal studies. And so, there's different brain wave activities in the brain, and gamma is one of them. And so we know based on animal studies that we can induce this um, steady gamma wave, where the oscillations are, I don't even know if you could see my hands, but I tend to talk with my hands a little bit. These steady brain waves are important to functioning. And this type of brainwave, the gamma brainwave in particular, is important to learning and memory. So it was initially learned in animal studies, and then this multidisciplinary team at MIT actually had, developed this apparatus to use with people. And I do remember, meeting with the Cognito group over time at meetings, because as I mentioned, we also did the first study, which is more of a proof of concept. And I was wondering, like, well, it's one thing to do this in animal studies, but it's another thing. Will people really sit and do this for an hour where they are wearing these sort of type of glasses and headsets and will people be compliant? And actually, people in general really are. Our experience in doing the studies is that, people, they find the 1 hour day, they sit and do it. And, some people actually find it to have come in and described it as being relaxing. And so they were really able to come up with a device that, people can use and hopefully potentially will really benefit from.
I think of like the masks that everyone's wearing for, to remain youthful, the red light masks. This is just for your brain, right?
Mhm. I gotta
Um,
get myself one of those red
yeah,
masks then.
I know. I was thinking the same. Um, okay, so in phase two, I think there was probably a 70 something, is that right, patients who were in phase two. Was and all of those patients had confirmed Alzheimer's diagnosis.
Mhm.
Did was the study changed so that, okay, we realized one of the benefits is less brain shrinkage, therefore we're going to focus on that? Or was it initially for the amyloid, as a way to treat amyloid, or at least prevent amyloid from building up?
Mhm. Yes, so in the Overture study, the first one, at that time, in order to qualify for the study, patients, part of the screening process, I should say, was getting an amyloid PET scan. And, but at that time, we were not using the blood biomarkers. So we've advanced. And so part of the protocol is different just based on newer technologies that we have. But the patients enrolled in the study also they also got certain types of volumetric MRIs that enabled the study team to look and see the effects on the brain. And this phase 3 study, they're continuing to look at those things and to have, better confirmation and more data on more people.
Okay, so depending on let's hypothetically say, oh, this looked in phase three, and we're not. How long is phase three for? I know it's just enrolling, but how long will it last for?
It's a 1 year study, so it's a 12-month study, and then there's the opportunity to be in an open label extension.
Okay, and then depending on those results, if it provides to be if it's deemed effective as a treatment for Alzheimer's, I guess in the back of my mind, I'm kind of thinking, well, couldn't this be used by everyone then? Like, no one wants their brain to shrink, right? In
Um,
terms of brain health.
yes, and one of the things that actually I think is very exciting about the finding from the Overture study about this affecting reduction in brain volume loss is that it may be something that is applicable not just to Alzheimer's disease, but to other types of neurodegenerative disease. And to your point, potentially normal aging, where we know there's brain volume loss as well. We don't know the answer to those questions because in a research study, we do try to have a kind of a very defined population so that we are able to, ask specific questions and look at the data to get specific answers. But those are certainly things that we should look into in the future. I hope the Cognito team will, because there can be, lots of, widespread application. And because this is an intervention that is non-invasive. It has, it's very safe. It's very inclusive in terms of, whether if you have other types of medical conditions or taking, other types of medications. Of course, there are restrictions, but they're much less than other, drugs and interventions that I've worked on in terms of clinical trials. So, just imagine if you could, you know, go to your pharmacy and get one of these and, utilize it for all different purposes. I think it's, I think it's like a wonderful option.
Instead of AirPods, we're going to see people with headsets on doing
Yeah,
their.
why not? They look cool.
So, I have a question though. So, I'm presumably, if it's a light therapy treatment, it would be something that you would have to stay on, right, indefinitely, or are you actually looking within this study to see if there is a limited period of time that one uses the headset and then, okay, everything's looking good?
So we don't really know the answer to that. So, we know what the effects are over the time frame of somebody, being in the study, whether or not someone has to keep using it, or could they potentially at some point, instead of using it 7 days a week, use it 3 days a week and, maintain the same effect. Those are all great questions that need to be studied.
Okay, and then in terms of testing, I take it people come in and they get a cognitive assessment. Is that right?
They will get a cognitive assessment and battery of cognitive and behavioral tests as part of the protocol. Yes.
But are you, one of my reporters, Simon Spycheck, was saying that he's wondering why this particular study is actually using a different measure. So you guys, I think, use the for this study, uses the MMSE instead of what, for example, people on lecanemab or any of the monoclonal antibodies, there's a different type of measurement in terms of cognitive assessment.
I don't believe that to be true. So, the mini mental status exam is very often used, not just in clinical trials, but also in clinical practice. There are, uh, the mini mental status exam has, for one piece of it, different items, and there are differences in that. So in one of them, you're asked to spell a particular word backwards, and in another version, you're asked to count in what we call serial sevens. So there are differences there, but the mini mental status exam is often used in clinical trials. There's another scale that's similar to the mini mental status exam called the MOCA. And that is sometimes used, but the mini mental status exam is very commonly used. And the other cognitive scales that are being used in this study, I would say are pretty similar and consistent with most other trials that we are conducting.
Yeah. Sheila has just sent in a question asking if anybody who had been taking Leqembi, obviously they can't be on it now, but what if they were in a trial? Would they qualify for this study? So to answer Sheila's question, you can't be on one of the monoclonal antibodies, right, and enter the phase 3 trial. What if you had been? Could you enter this, or would that disqualify you?
I believe that there is a 1 year washout period. So if somebody was on a monoclonal antibody treatment and then now they haven't been on it for a period of time, and I believe it's 1 year, that they would be eligible.
Okay, so they would have to have been off the medication for a full
Yeah,
year
what we
before
call a washout, yes.
what you call a washout. Okay, so tell me, Michelle, what does this mean for just the whole landscape of research? Should there be a non-invasive device to treat Alzheimer's? What does this mean for the future, and what does this mean for treatments?
Well, I think it's extremely exciting to have a non-invasive treatment that would be, you know, hopefully, accessible to everyone. And I also think the fact that it addresses a different mechanism of action than other drugs that are in the pipeline or that have already been FDA approved, is getting us sort of closer and closer to combination treatment. I also, if you look at some of the more recently approved drugs for Alzheimer's disease, which also extremely exciting to have disease modifying drugs. They are, more expensive. They involve healthcare teams in order to be able to, give people these drugs safely and to monitor them. And so while I'm all in favor and very excited about that as well, this offers a much lower risk option that would not burden our Medicare, our medical system in the same way as some of these other drugs. It could be adjunct therapy to other therapies. It could offer possibilities for people who cannot be on those monoclonal antibody drugs. So, for some people, those drugs are too risky because of some of the potential side effects. So, this opens up, another option as either a sole treatment for people who can't take these other drugs for whatever reason. Also, the monoclonal antibody drugs and many other drugs that are being studied are for people very early on. So there's a lot of focus on early intervention. This is a treatment that could be helpful early on and also potentially even as the disease progresses. So I think all of those things, provides an opportunity that doesn't currently exist.
Um, I knew this was going to come up. Well, I have two questions. One is from Theodora, who's saying, could you please comment on which p-tau biomarker you're using in this HOPE study?
Mhm. This is p-tau 181.
181. So that's one of the biomarkers in the blood for amyloid plaque. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then Michael is asking, what's the price of the device? I'm not sure we know that yet, but
I can, it's free of cost if you're in a clinical trial. So the device is not on the market. So it's not available to purchase, but if you qualify for the study, it will be made available to you free of cost when you participate in the study.
yeah, so the idea is like if the trial's successful, then there's applying for FDA approval, and then it will be released into the market. So that's usually a longer timeline. I mean, you said the trial is going to be about a year, right? And then
Well, it'll be more than that because there's, it's each person's participation in the double-blinded phase is a year, and then there's an opportunity to be in an open label extension. And by the time we're done recruiting everybody and everybody finishes that their 1 year double blind, then we'll have the results of the study. And the study is almost fully enrolled. There's some opportunity, as I mentioned, for people who have moderate symptoms to still screen for the study. So if there are listeners out there who are thinking about it for themselves or someone they know, I always tell people don't wait, go in and start the screening process, because once you've started the screening process, you have the opportunity to decide to continue, if you're eligible. But when studies close, they close, and then the opportunity isn't there anymore.
okay, and so I think that we're going to also link to the HOPE study page for anyone who's listening to this and wants to know more about the study. You can find more information there. Thank you so much, Michelle. I mean, it's really fascinating. I'm really curious about this. This would be really exciting to add to treatments, especially because
Absolutely.
it's non-invasive. It's not a drug. So I should ask you, no side effects so far, or have there?
The side effect profile is really really great, and there really don't seem to be serious side effects. So in terms of safety profile of an intervention, it has a really good safety profile.
What were some of the side effects, like headaches or what? Like,
Yes, headache could be one. Sometimes if the device wearing the device, there could be, some discomfort, but we have been able to work with the study team to make adjustments to make it comfortable.
great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks so much to Cognito Therapeutics for supporting this talk. We're grateful. We like to hear about the latest technology. Obviously, a lot of people in our community do as well. So thank you for taking the time to share with us. Always great to see you.
Great. Great seeing you.
Right.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Sure. And if anyone missed any of this talk, we always publish on beingpatient.com. Sign up for our newsletters. That's when you hear about more of these talks, like the one we just did with Michelle. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next time.